Hello everybody! Welcome to another video from Code Shots with Profanis. This is an introductory video in state management using NGXS in an Angular application. So, let's get started. This is the application that we will work with, and of course, what else? It's yet one more to-do application, and it currently does not have NGXS. We will refactor the code and we will use NGXS progressively. How this works? Whenever we click an item, we mark it as done. Whenever we toggle it, we mark it as to do, and we can add more items here, something like, I don't know, buy milk. And here is the new item. And of course, if we click the buy milk, like we said, we toggle it between to-do state, done and to-do. Let's go to the VS Code to see what we have. I will go directly to the to-do list component and let's start with the markup. We have two different sections here. The first one is the add new item section and the other one is the to-do items. Let's see what we have in the add new item. We have just an input here, which is a mat input with an ng model bound with a new item name. And of course we have our button with the label add, and as soon as we click this button, we have the add item event handler. And then in the to-do items, we have a mat list, and we iterate over the items, and for each item we are creating a checkbox. And in the change event, we have the toggle item event handler. So let's go back to the TypeScript code to see what we have. And let's start with the add item. What we're doing is that we have this early exit condition, and then as soon as we have the new item and it's not falsy, we mutate this items array. And this is the toggle item. And the only thing that we're doing is to toggle the state, no more than this. Before we start examining the state management, let's see a bit the flow that we're following into the component. And what I mean with flow, I mean that we have the component and we click the button emits this event, of course, and the event via the event handler mutates the component. And what do we mean mutates the component? The component state, these items. We will change the flow a bit and we will see how it goes with state management. So we have the component. From the component, we will dispatch an action. The action will mutate the state and the state lives into the store. Inside the store, we will have the selectors and we will use the selectors to select a specific piece of information back to the component. Of course, we will start the development piece by piece. And you know what? We will start from the state. We will do the state and then we will do the actions. And from the actions, we will start with the selectors so that we can use them into the component. Let's get started. Let's do this. Let's start by installing NGXS. The command is npm I at ngxs/store. Let's go to the packagation to make sure that we have it. And yeah, here it is. Now, let's open the app module and into the imports, what we're going to do is to import the specific module. And this is the NGXS module.forRoot. So by mistake, I typed for feature. In NGXS, we have for root and for feature. For feature is something that we will use for feature modules. We won't see this in this video, but we will cover this in a later video as well, so stay tuned. Let's start with the method forRoot. We need to have an empty array, and I will explain why. And we have to define in NGXS whether we are in a development mode or not. And how to do this? By using the environment.production, and of course we need to have the exclamation mark. So in this array, what we are going to do is to define our states. We currently do not have one, so let's create the first state. Inside the to-do directory, I will create a new file and I will name it to-do-state.ts. This is going to be a class, export class to-do state, and we need also to have the injectable decorator here. And since this to-do state is going to be used by NGXS, we have to use the state decorator as well. This is a generic type, and we have to define a type. Let's start by any. Of course, we will improve this. And we need also to have a name. I will type the to-do, and also we need to have some defaults. And I will explain what the defaults are as well. So let's import this. So let's start by this thing and then by the name. So when we say state management, you can imagine that the state management is something like a very huge object. And in this object, we can have a to-do array. And inside this, we can have different objects. Something like I have an ID, I have the isDone property, might be false, and I also have the name. Like we said previously, buy milk. And we can have as many items as we wish. This is the ID2, and this is true, and buy cake. So this is the first item. And then we might have another slice, and I will name it shopping. Ignore the red lines. And again, we can have something like is the ID. I don't want to have this done, but I want just to have the name. Shopping item 1 and shopping item 2. Okay. So what we have here is the to-do, and then we have the shopping. Each of these things, this is the first one and the shopping is the second one. We have two different slices. And whenever we create a state, we are handling a slice of the global state. And that's why we need to have also a name into the state. Now let's start with this any type. The state, since it handles a specific part of the global state, it needs also to have a shape, right? And our shape is this object. We need to have the ID, isDone, and name. So let's delete these lines and let's improve this a bit. So what I'm going to do is to export interface, and I will name it to-do state model. And I will have some items here. And you know what? I already have a to-do model. Let's visit this. And I have the ID, title, and isDone. And I want my model to be items of to-do model array. And now I will use this here. And I will have an error from the linter into the defaults. This means that items is not nullable. So this is our state. In our state, for this video, we will do two things. The first one is the add item, and the other one is the toggle item. Okay, so this is the very first step. We will revisit the to-do state, but first let's create the actions. Because what we said is that we have the state, and the state is mutated by the actions. Similarly, I will create in this directory a new file named to-do-actions.ts. And the actions are no more than simple classes. For this video, we need to have two different classes. The first one is the add item action, and the other one is toggle item action. I will have a static read-only type, and my type is actually the unique identifier. And it's a very good practice to have here a to-do page, for example, a context for this action, and something to describe it. And into the constructor, I will type public name of type string. And you might be wondering, why do we need here to have the constructor? Think that whenever we have an event, regardless of the state, whenever we have an event, this event might have the event arguments. Similarly, in the state management, each action, which is similar to the events, has the arguments as well. And that's why we have to define into the constructor these kind of arguments. So let's copy this. And the second action will be the toggle item. And the only thing that I need here is the ID, which is of type number. And of course, don't forget to change the name. Now, let's go back to our state. I will copy this class. And I want the add item to be invoked whenever someone dispatches the action add item. I will use the decorator action. And inside the parentheses, I will add just the name. The add item method now will be invoked by the NGXS automatically, and it will have two different arguments. The first one is the context, and actually is the state context, and we have to provide the to-do state model. And this model is the shape of our state. And the second argument is the action itself, which is the add item action. Okay. The reason that we need here to have the context is that what is the purpose of the action? To mutate the state. So we need to have the state, and that's why we need to have here the context. Let's start by creating the const_state equals ctx get state. This is the method that we use for NGXS. And before this, it would be a very good idea to have our logic here. In the add item action, what we want to achieve is to add item into the items array. So we need to have the name. Const name equals action. Actually, this name, let me follow the add item action, is this one. If the name is falsy, I just want to return. Now let's prepare the new to-do item. And this is going to have an ID. By default, this done are going to be false. And I also want to have the name. Is this correct? It seems that I didn't add a type here, and my type is a to-do model. So let's add a type here. And it seems that this is not correct because I need to have the title. Yeah, so this is it. And now we have to set the state. We created it, and let's assign it. Whenever we mutate the state, we have to keep the previous state as is. It's a good idea. And also what I want to do is change just the items of this array. And you know what? I'm going to add a new item. So I'm going to keep all the previous items of the array, and I'm going to push a new item. So this is it. This is how we mutate it. And what I'm going to do here is a console log ctx get state, just for debugging purposes. Before we start working with the selectors, let's go to the component to dispatch an action to see what is happening. But even before this, I will copy the to-do state, and we have to go back to the app module and define our new state here in the forward method. Nice. Now let's go to our component into the to-do list, and inside the add item, no matter what, I want to dispatch an action. And for this reason, we need to have the constructor, a private store, and then I will simply this store dispatch, and we'll have to define the new add item action, and we'll have to provide the name here. If you remember, we already have this new item, and we'll have to use this here. Let's see, I will type buy milk, and I will click the add button. And this is what we have from the state management. We have ID 100, a random value, is done by default false, and then we have the title, which is buy milk. And if I type something else, buy cake, add, it seems now that we have two different items, buy milk and buy cake. Nice. So we managed to mutate the state. Now let's continue and let's see how to use the selectors. Into the to-do directory, I will add a new file, and this will be the to-do selectors.ts. And when we say selectors, this is a piece of information from our object. Like the example that we had previously, that we have the to-do items, and also we had the shopping list. Here we have some objects, and here we have some other objects as well. And when we say that we want to have a selector, it's something like I want to select this, a specific information from our state. I will start by typing the export class to do selectors. And I will have here a static method, and I will name it to do items. This will return the to do model array. And somehow I have to link this static method with my state. How can I do this? By using the selector, the creator, and be like, you know what? This is going to be used by to-do state. And the argument of the to-do items is the state itself. And if you remember, the state has a shape. And what is the shape? The to-do state model. And what I want to return is the state.items. This will be my selector. Now let's go to our component into the to-do list, and let's use this selector. We have to select the selectors. And for this reason, we will use this select, and we'll have to select the selector. Let's add a name. I will name it to do items $, and this is going to be of type observable to do model array. Let's go to the HTML, and instead of iterating over the items, let's iterate over the new to do items, which is an observable. And of course, we'll have to use here the async pipe. You know what? Let's also have here this. Let's go to the browser. Currently, we have just an empty array, and if we add any item, buy milk for example, and we click add, this is what we have. And if we click the checkbox, this means as is. And this is the second step. So in a couple of minutes, we managed to cover the circle of the NGXS and how this works. We have the component, and the component dispatches an action. The action mutates the state into the store, and we also have the selectors, and the component select those selectors. Before we move on, just pause the video and try to fix this by yourself. So now let's fast forward into the solution of the toggle item. This is our implementation, and let's now delete the previous code to see how clean our code becomes. So the toggle item does one thing and the add item does one thing. Let's now go to the browser to see what we have. If I type buy milk and click add, we have it here. This done is false, but if we click this becomes true. Nice. So that was it. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments below and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.